What if the rockets were never the real technology? What if those giant columns of fire tearing through the Florida sky were not proof of human progress, but theater, a show, a controlled ritual, a very expensive distraction? Because for more than 60 years, NASA has told the public the same story. If you want to leave Earth, you need fuel, a lot of fuel. You need chemical explosions, launch towers, countdown clocks, and billion-dollar machines strapped to the backs of astronauts who are basically sitting on top of a controlled bomb. That's the story. That's the version we were raised on. But what if that version was never the limit of human science? What if it was the public version of human science? What if, behind the rockets, behind the live streams, behind the smiling press conferences and polished mission patches, there was another program entirely? A program that didn't try to fight gravity, but shut it off. Some researchers call it anti-gravity. Some call it field propulsion. Some call it gravitational shielding. But inside the darker corners of the black budget world, one alleged name keeps coming back. Project Anchor, a machine said to create a localized field where Earth's pull simply stops behaving normally. Not reduced, not weakened by clever engineering, turned against itself. And if even a fraction of that claim is true, then NASA may not be the peaceful scientific agency we were taught to admire. It may be something stranger, a front-facing mask for a hidden branch of physics so powerful that releasing it would not just change space travel, it would break the modern world. Oil, aviation, power grids, shipping, war, everything. Because if you control gravity, you don't just control motion, you control civilization. And that's where the story gets ugly. For decades, the public has been told anti-gravity is nonsense, a comic book idea, a science fiction gimmick, something for UFO forums, late-night radio, and people who spend too much time staring at grainy footage of lights in the sky. On paper, that sounds reasonable. Gravity is gravity. It pulls things down. You can't switch it off like a lamp. You can't cancel it with a machine in a basement. That's what we're told. And for most people, that answer is enough. Because the alternative is uncomfortable. The alternative means someone may have solved one of the biggest problems in physics, and then buried it. Not because it didn't work, because it worked too well. NASA's public story is simple. Rockets are hard. Space is expensive. Progress is slow. We need more funding, more testing, more patience, more years, always more years. And yet, if you look closely at the last century of classified research, the story starts getting thin in places. There are experiments that don't fit, witnesses that don't go away, pilots describing craft that move like physics is optional, budget trails that vanish into places nobody can fully explain. And behind all of it sits the same quiet question. If gravity is truly unbreakable, why have so many powerful institutions spent so much money trying to break it? That's where we begin. Not with aliens, not yet. Not with wild claims about secret moon bases or hidden fleets. We begin with something smaller, a spinning disk, a laboratory, and a scientist who may have accidentally touched the edge of forbidden physics. In 1992, a Russian scientist named Eugene Podkletnov reportedly conducted an experiment involving a rotating superconducting disk. Now, superconductors sound complicated. They are. But the basic idea is simple enough. A superconductor is a material that, under the right conditions, can conduct electricity with almost no resistance, no friction, no normal electrical drag. It's one of those states of matter that already feels like the universe forgot to close a loophole. Podkletnov's setup involved a ceramic superconducting disk cooled to extremely low temperatures, then rotated at high speed under an electromagnetic field. That alone is not strange. Scientists work with superconductors all the time. But according to Podkletnov's reports, something unexpected happened. Objects placed above the spinning disk appeared to lose a small amount of weight. Not much. A few percent, depending on the account, but enough to be disturbing. Because weight is not just a number on a scale. Weight is gravity acting on mass. If an object loses weight without losing mass, then something is interfering with gravity. And if that happens in a lab, even slightly, then the entire public story of propulsion changes. Naturally, the mainstream scientific community did what it often does when a discovery threatens too much too quickly. It laughed. Then it attacked. Then it moved on. Podkletnov's claims were criticized, disputed, and treated by many as fringe science. Some researchers said his work could not be reliably reproduced. Others suggested measurement error. Others simply dismissed it outright. And to be fair, extraordinary claims deserve pressure. That's how science is supposed to work. But here's where things get uncomfortable. According to several reports and long-running claims in aerospace circles, NASA did not simply laugh and walk away. Publicly, anti-gravity was nonsense. Privately, they were interested. Very interested. Because if Podkletnov was wrong, there was nothing to study. No reason to care. No reason to quietly form teams, examine superconducting rotation, or look into gravitational shielding effects. And yet, according to accounts that have circulated for years, internal interest did exist. That doesn't prove Project Anchor. It doesn't prove a hidden anti-gravity machine. But it does suggest something important. The people who mocked the idea in public may not have been nearly as dismissive behind closed doors. And that pattern matters. We've seen it before. A subject gets ridiculed. The witnesses get labeled confused. The media turns the whole thing into a joke. Then, years later, documents surface showing government agencies were studying the exact same thing the public was told to ignore. That is not a theory. That is a pattern. UFOs were treated that way for decades. People saw strange craft. Pilots reported objects moving in impossible ways. Military personnel came forward, and the public answer was always the same. Weather balloons, swamp gas, misidentified aircraft, optical illusions. Then suddenly, after years of ridicule, the U.S. government admitted that unidentified anomalous phenomena were real enough to investigate. Not necessarily alien, not automatically extraterrestrial, but real enough, tracked, recorded, discussed in briefings. And that should have changed the way people think. Because if the official position can shift that dramatically once, it can shift again. The craft described in many UAP encounters do not behave like conventional aircraft. They hover without visible rotors. They accelerate without heat plumes. They make sharp turns that would crush a human pilot. They appear to move from stillness to extreme speed almost instantly. No wings, no exhaust, no sonic boom in some reports. Just motion that seems to ignore drag, inertia, and gravity. Now, there are several possible explanations. Some sightings may be sensor errors. Some may be classified drones. Some may be misidentified objects. Some may involve foreign technology. That is the careful answer. But there is another possibility, one that does not require aliens at all. What if some of these craft are ours? Not ours as in public NASA. Not ours as in Lockheed press releases and glossy defense contractor animations. Ours as in black-budget aerospace. The kind that does not appear in public catalogs. The kind that does not get shown at air shows. The kind built under programs with names nobody in Congress can pronounce, because nobody in Congress is ever given the full list. If a craft can manipulate the gravitational field around it, the impossible suddenly starts looking less impossible. Hovering without rotors? That makes sense. No heat exhaust? You're not pushing air backward with combustion. Instant acceleration? If the craft is moving inside a field that alters inertia or gravity, the pilot may not experience motion the way normal physics would suggest. No sonic boom? If the craft bends the space around it instead of forcing itself through air in the usual way, maybe the shock wave doesn't form the same way. That is not proof, but it is a model, and models matter when the old explanation keeps failing. This is where Project Anchor enters the darker mythology of classified aerospace. The alleged concept is not simply to lift a craft. That would be impressive enough. The deeper claim is that the machine creates a localized counterfield, a bubble, a pocket, a space where the relationship between mass and gravity is altered. Think of gravity like a current in a river. You don't have to destroy the river to move differently inside it. You change the flow around you. You redirect it. You create interference. You build a pocket where the current no longer pushes the same way. Now apply that to space-time. That's the idea. Not magic, not levitation in the cartoon sense. Field engineering. And if that sounds too big for government research, remember something. Governments funded the atomic bomb before most people understood the atom. They funded stealth aircraft before most people believed a plane could hide from radar. They built spy satellites while the public still imagined espionage as trench coats and dead drops. The public always learns about breakthrough technology late. Not a little late, very late. So if a workable gravity control system existed, would we really expect it to be announced on a NASA live stream with cheerful music and a downloadable classroom worksheet? Come on, that's not how power behaves. Power does not hand out paradigm-shifting technology because it would be good for humanity. Power studies it, locks it down, militarizes it, then tells the public the future is still 20 years away. Always 20 years. That brings us to the money. Because secret physics does not run on vibes. It runs on money. Ridiculous amounts of it. For decades, the Pentagon has struggled with audits. Huge sums are difficult to track through the defense bureaucracy. Sometimes the explanation is boring. Bad accounting. Layered contracts. A maze of agencies, vendors, subcontractors, classified programs, and legacy systems that barely talk to each other. That's the official answer. And again, some of it is probably true. But the boring explanation doesn't erase the uncomfortable one. When billions move through systems ordinary citizens can't see, when trillions get discussed in audit failures and accounting gaps, when black budget programs are protected by classification, the question is not whether money disappears. The question is where it reappears. Deep underground military bases are often treated as conspiracy folklore. DUMBs. It sounds almost too perfect. But underground facilities absolutely exist. That part is not controversial. The U.S. government has built hardened command centers, subterranean complexes, bunkers, mountain facilities, continuity of government sites, and classified research environments for decades. The disagreement is not whether underground facilities exist. They do. The disagreement is what happens inside the deepest ones. If you were developing a technology that could manipulate gravity, where would you test it? Not above a city, not near civilian airports, not in the open desert where satellite watchers and aviation hobbyists can track you. You would want isolation, security, geological stability, restricted airspace, massive power access, compartmentalized personnel, and enough underground space that a failed test does not become a public event. That is where the black budget theory starts to feel less ridiculous. Because a public NASA launch is a spectacle. A rocket goes up, cameras track it, the nation cheers, kids watch in classrooms. It is clean, dramatic, and emotionally useful. But a gravity control program? That would not look like a launch. It would look like silence. No cameras, no flags, no press room, no countdown. Just a sealed facility, a power spike, and a machine that makes the floor forget which way is down. And if that machine worked even once, it would change everything. Not just spaceflight, everything. Cars, planes, ships, power plants, mining, construction, weapons, logistics, economics. The entire world is built around fighting gravity and paying for energy. Every flight ticket, every gas bill, every shipping route, every rocket launch, every heavy lift crane, every military transport, every power plant feeding the machines that push matter around this planet. Gravity is not just a force. It is a tax. It taxes motion. It taxes energy. It taxes every person alive. If you can reduce or control that tax, you don't just invent a better engine. You threaten the entire structure. And that may be the real reason Project Anchor, if it exists, would never be released. Because the moment gravity manipulation becomes public, the oil industry has a problem. The aviation industry has a problem. The defense industry has a problem. The power grid has a problem. The entire economic system built around scarcity has a problem. And the gatekeepers, the people who sit between the public and the future, have the biggest problem of all. They lose the leash. That's the part nobody wants to say out loud. A world with gravity-controlled technology is not just a world with cooler aircraft. It is a world where energy politics changes overnight, where remote communities no longer need the same infrastructure, where cargo can move differently, where access to orbit becomes cheap enough to destroy old monopolies, where war becomes unrecognizable, where every major power has to rethink what borders even mean. So if you're sitting at the top of the current system and somebody brings you a machine that can break the old rules, you don't release it. You bury it. You classify it. You call it unstable. You call it impossible. You call anyone who talks about it a crank. Then you keep using rockets in public because rockets are understandable. Rockets preserve the illusion of difficulty. Rockets keep space expensive. And as long as space stays expensive, access stays controlled. That may be the most important part of the whole story. NASA's public rocket program does not just move objects into orbit. It maintains a world view. Space is hard. Space is slow. Space is for agencies, billionaires, and defense contractors. Ordinary people can watch. They can cheer. They can buy the T-shirt. But they do not get access. Now imagine what happens if Project Anchor is real. Imagine a machine that makes gravity negotiable. Suddenly, space is not a distant frontier. It is a locked door, and someone has the key. That reframes everything. The UAP sightings, the black budgets, the strange military interest in exotic physics, the decades of ridicule around anti-gravity research, the public reliance on chemical rockets that look increasingly primitive next to reported craft behavior. On its own, each piece can be dismissed. The pilot saw something wrong. The scientist made a measurement error. The budget gap is bureaucracy. The black programs are normal defense work. The rocket theater is just how space travel works. Fine, maybe. But combined with everything else, the pattern starts to look different. Suddenly, the pieces don't sit flat. They lean toward each other. And that's when the story stops feeling like a collection of rumors and starts feeling like a managed boundary, a line the public is not supposed to cross. Now let's take one breath, because if NASA really has access to gravity-bending technology, then their public image becomes accidentally hilarious. This is the agency that allegedly might be sitting on the keys to controlling the pull of an entire planet. And yet somehow, every time we get a live stream from orbit, the camera looks like it was borrowed from a 2005 flip phone. The feed freezes, the audio drops, the image glitches, and we're supposed to believe they can whisper to probes across the solar system, maybe bend space-time in a classified facility, but setting up a stable Wi-Fi connection on the International Space Station? Apparently, that's where modern science hits the wall. It's funny, until it isn't. Because that contrast, the public clumsiness and the alleged private capability, is exactly what makes the whole thing so strange. The public sees the old machinery, the rockets, the delays, the budget hearings, the shaky footage, the careful press statements. But behind that, one theory proposes, there is another NASA. Not the poster on the classroom wall, not the smiling astronaut agency, a gatekeeping structure, a public-facing symbol attached to a deeper network of defense contractors, classified labs, military aerospace, intelligence oversight, and black-budget physics. A machine that smiles with one face and locks doors with the other. That accusation is heavy. It should be handled carefully. There are brilliant scientists at NASA, real engineers, real astronauts, real people doing honest work. This is not about them. This is about the layer above them, the compartmentalized layer, the part where information stops flowing upward and starts disappearing sideways. Because classified programs are built on separation. One team sees materials, another sees power systems, another sees flight behavior, another sees test results. Nobody sees the whole machine. That's how secrets survive. Not because thousands of people keep one giant secret perfectly, because very few people are allowed to know what the secret even is. And if Project Anchor exists, it would be built exactly that way. A physicist might think he's studying superconducting anomalies. An engineer might think she's working on vibration isolation. A contractor might think he's designing advanced magnetic containment. A pilot might be told he's testing an experimental platform, not a gravity control craft. Everyone sees a piece. The gatekeepers see the map. That structure is not fantasy. It is how compartmentalized programs function. And once you understand that, the silence around anti-gravity research starts feeling less like absence and more like design. Look back at Podkletnov. A claim appears, it gets mocked. Then it disappears into controversy. Look at UAP reports. Pilots describe motion that does not fit known propulsion. They are ignored for years. Then the government admits the issue is real enough to study. Look at missing defense money. Officials talk about accounting complexity. The public shrugs because the numbers are too large to feel human. Look at public rockets. Huge, loud, expensive, spectacular. Perfect for maintaining the story that gravity is still the final boss. Each piece has a normal explanation, but together they form a shadow. And that shadow points back to the same uncomfortable possibility. Someone may know more about gravity than the public has been allowed to learn. The climax of this story is not a single leaked file. It is not one whistleblower. It is not one strange lab experiment. It is the motive. Why hide it? That is the question that matters. If anti-gravity does not work, there is nothing to hide. If it barely works, maybe it stays in research. But if it works well enough to be useful, then hiding it becomes one of the most valuable acts in modern history. Because releasing it would be chaos. Not inspirational TED Talk chaos. Real chaos. Markets collapsing. Energy monopolies threatened. Military balance shattered. Airlines obsolete. Rocket companies humiliated. Oil infrastructure devalued. Entire geopolitical strategies rewritten. And the public asking the one question no gatekeeper wants to hear. How long have you had this? That question is dangerous. Not because of the answer, because of the follow-up. What else did you keep from us? If Project Anchor is real, then the crime is not simply secrecy. It is delay. A stolen future. Decades of human progress locked away because it threatened the wrong people. The public kept paying for fuel, paying for power, paying for scarcity, paying to live inside a system that may have been technologically obsolete behind closed doors. That is the anger underneath this story. Not that a secret machine exists. That would be shocking. The anger is that the machine, if real, represents a future withheld. A future placed behind fences, badges, clearances, and black budgets. A future where humanity could have stepped beyond chemical rockets, while the public was still being sold controlled explosions as the height of possibility. Maybe that's too dark. Maybe it gives the gatekeepers too much credit. Maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe anti-gravity remains experimental, unstable, unreliable, and wildly misunderstood. Maybe Podkletnov's results were flawed. Maybe UAPs are a mix of drones, sensor artifacts, foreign platforms, and human error. Maybe the missing money is just bureaucracy eating itself alive. Maybe NASA is exactly what it says it is. A public science agency doing difficult work with limited tools and massive constraints. That is possible. It has to be said. But if that is the simple answer, it still leaves a lot of residue. Too many people saw too many things. Too many programs got buried. Too much money moved through systems nobody can clearly explain. Too many aircraft have been reported moving in ways that conventional propulsion does not easily explain. Too many old anti-gravity claims were mocked in public while quietly studied in private. And too many times, the public has been told something was impossible, right up until the moment it became classified. So maybe the real secret is not that NASA built a machine that breaks gravity. Maybe the real secret is that the public is trained to reject the idea before evidence can even be discussed. That is how you protect a boundary. You don't need to silence everyone. You make the topic sound stupid. You make serious people afraid to touch it. You make journalists roll their eyes. You make academics worry about their careers. You make witnesses doubt themselves. Then the secret polices itself. And if anyone gets too close, they're not debated. They're laughed out of the room. That may be the most effective cover of all. Not a locked vault, not a military guard. A cultural reflex, a smirk, a joke, a label. Anti-gravity? Come on, grow up. And just like that, the door stays shut. But doors do not stay shut forever. The internet changed the game. Pilots can speak, documents can leak, old interviews can resurface, satellite watchers can compare images, independent researchers can build timelines, and communities can connect pieces that were never meant to be placed side by side. That does not mean every theory is true. Most are probably not. But it does mean the gatekeepers no longer control the conversation completely. And that matters. Because if Project Anchor is a myth, then it will remain a myth. But if there is something behind it, even a piece of it, then the story is not over. It is waiting for the right crack. A document, a witness, a budget trail, a flight test, a pilot who finally decides the truth matters more than the clearance. And when that happens, the public will not ask whether gravity can be controlled. They will ask why they were told not to ask. That is where this leaves us. Not with proof, not with certainty, with a pattern of ridicule, interest, secrecy, money, sightings, and motive. A pattern that circles the same forbidden idea again and again. Gravity may not be the fixed prison we were taught to imagine. It may be a system, and systems can be hacked. If NASA, the Pentagon, or their contractors found a way to hack it, they would not just own a propulsion breakthrough. They would own the future. And the future is the one thing powerful people never give away for free. So maybe the rockets are real. Maybe the science is real. Maybe the astronauts are brave and the missions matter. All of that can be true. And still, another story can exist underneath it. A darker story. A hidden branch of physics. A black budget machine. A technology that makes the old world obsolete. A technology so dangerous, not because it destroys, but because it liberates. That is the part that should stay with you. If Project Anchor exists, it is not just a weapon. It is not just a spacecraft engine. It is not just the explanation for impossible motion in the sky. It is a key. And the question is not whether humanity is ready for the key. The question is whether the people holding it were ever planning to hand it over. So I want to hear from you. Do you think NASA is just a group of passionate space nerds doing the best they can with chemical rockets and government budgets? Or is there another layer, a shadow military branch hiding gravity control technology to protect the elite's energy monopoly? Do you think the strange UAP movement we've seen for decades is visitors from somewhere else? Or the first glimpse of something built right here, with money the public was never meant to trace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Disagree if you want. Push back. Add what we missed. That's how this community works. Here at Forbidden Origins US, we are not blinded by the glare of X.